The girl stepped into the road like she meant to stop a bullet. The cowboy reined his ram to a halt, breath clouding in the frozen air. Dusk bled across the Wyoming Territory sky, turning the crossroads into a place where choices became permanent. 3 miles from Medicine Bend, the wind cut through his coat like a promise of harder things to come. Behind the child, a woman slumped against a boulder, too thin, too still. The girl couldn't have been more than 8. Her feet were bare on the ice, bleeding. She wore a dress that had been mended so many times. The original fabric was mostly memory. But her eyes held something that made grown men look away, the kind of desperation that calculates impossible trades. "Can you take her instead of me?" The words came out steady despite the shaking. The woman behind her tried to rise, failed, tried to speak, managed only a broken sound. The cowboy understood immediately. Debt collectors, the kind of men who turned widows into property and children into collateral. He'd seen it before, had looked away before. The men said they'd take one, the girl continued. "Take Mama." "She's stronger." The woman finally found her voice. "Emma, no." 30 seconds of silence. The cowboy's horse stamped. Impatient, somewhere in the distance, wolves tested their voices against the coming night. He dismounted. His boots crunched on frozen ground. "I'll take both." He lifted the child onto his saddle, then helped the woman up behind it. She was light as kindling, burning with fever. As they started toward his distant cabin, snow began to fall. The woman whispered, "Why?" He didn't answer. Behind them, 2 riders emerged from the tree line, watched for a moment, then turned back toward town. The threat wasn't gone, just delayed. The fire threw shadows that made them look like a real family. The cabin was small. 1 room, sparse, a wood stove, a table with 2 chairs, a bedroll in the corner. The kind of place a man lived when he'd stopped expecting company. But it was warm, and right now, warmth was everything. The cowboy boiled water, heated beans, and cornbread. He knelt before the girl, unwrapped her feet carefully. The frostbite hadn't gone deep yet, but another hour would have cost her toes. He cleaned the wounds with whiskey war-armed cloth. "Wrap them in wool. What's your name?" he asked. "Emma." Something shifted in his chest. He stood quickly. Busied himself with the stove. The woman Sarah, she said her name was Sarah, tried to help but collapsed into the chair. Malnourished, exhausted, he spooned broth into her mouth like she was a child herself. Between sips, the story came out. Husband dead 6 months, mine collapse, debts transferred to her, the saloon owner. Caleb Stokes had offered work or take Emma as collateral until the debt was paid. Emma had overheard men talking, thought offering herself would save her mother. The cowboy listened without expression. When she finished, he spoke. "You'll stay. Work the land when you're able. Child stays with me. No arguments." Sarah's pride flared despite her weakness. "I won't be a kept woman. Didn't ask you to be. Asked you to work." She studied his face, searching for the trap, found only stone and something underneath that might have been grief. "This is temporary," she said. "I'll repay you." He nodded but said nothing more. He gave them his bed, took the floor by the fire. Emma's voice came soft from the darkness. "What's your name?" Long pause. "Just call me Cowboy." As they slept, he stared out the window at 2 grave markers under snow. The wooden crosses were small. The names from this distance in the darkness were a label, but he knew them by heart. He taught the girl to split kindling like he'd once taught another small hand. Dawn came cold and gray. The cowboy moved through morning chores with Emma, shadowing him, feeding the roan, chopping wood, checking traps. He showed her how to hold the axe safely, where to place her feet like this, she asked, just like that. Sarah watched from the doorway, color returning to her face. The fever had broken in the night. She was stronger than she looked. Had to have survived this long. The memories came without permission. 3 years ago, Clara in labor screaming. The baby also named Emma, the coincidence, a knife in his gut, born silent. Clara following her 2 days later. He'd ridden for the doctor, but the snow had been too deep, the distance too far. 3 days to get help. 3 days too late. He'd buried them here, blamed himself, withdrew from everything. Mid-am morning, riders appeared. 2 men on dark horses. The cowboy recognized the type Stokes collectors, Virgil and Ray, men who did wet work for dry money. He stepped out with his Winchester. "We've come for the woman," Virgil said. "She's contracted property. She's under my protection." Ray spat tobacco. "Town won't stand for you harboring Stokes's property. You're making trouble. You can't afford." The cowboy cocked the rifle. The sound was very loud in the cold air. "Leave." Virgil's smile was ugly. "We'll be back with Sheriff Daniels and papers, legal papers. You just made an enemy of the wrong man, cowboy." They rode off but slowly, making a point. Inside, Sarah was packing the few things she'd arrived with. "I have to go. I'm ruining your life." He stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. "Only thing ruined here is this town's decency." Then he went outside and began clearing timber for a cabin expansion. Sarah followed. "Why, if you're staying, you need walls that hold." The point of no return had been crossed. He'd committed now. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. They worked like people who'd found something to believe in. 3 weeks passed. Late January brought a false thaw, turning the world to mud. The cowboy and Sarah framed the new room, her strength returning daily. Emma tended the chickens he'd bought, gathered eggs with fierce concentration. Small things accumulated into something larger. Sarah mended his torn coat without asking. He carved Emma a wooden horse. She named it Hope. The trip to Medicine Bend for supplies felt like crossing into enemy territory. Silence followed them through the general store. Women whispered behind hands. Men studied nails and flour with sudden fascination. Only the shopkeeper, a decent man named Tom, served them without judgment. "Stokes is spreading talk," Tom said quietly, "saying you're living in sin." The cowboy paid without response. Outside, children surrounded Emma, bastard girl, living with a man who ain't your daddy. Emma ran to the wagon, crying. Sarah gripped the seat rail. "I'm destroying your reputation. We should leave. Only thing destroyed here is this town's decency. We stay." That night, he taught Emma to read from his only book, a worn Bible. She traced the words with her finger, sounding them out. "Will you be my papa?" she asked suddenly. He froze. The air in the cabin went still. "If you'll have me," he said finally, voice rough. Sarah watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, she felt safe, actually safe. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance. Danger was still circling. Patient and hungry, the storm came like judgment. But inside, they built something weather couldn't touch. The February blizzard tore the canvas roof off the unfinished edition. Wind screamed through gaps in the walls. They retreated to the original cabin, Emma between them, feeding the wood stove constantly. By firelight, Sarah told the full story. Her husband had been a good man. The mine owner had ignored safety warnings. The widow's pension had been stolen by a company lawyer who sold her debt to Stokes. She tried honest work, laundry, cooking, but was blacklisted after refusing advances. "I'm not a," she said. "But this town wants me to be one." The cowboy stared into the fire, the flames reflected in his eyes like something burning from the inside out. "My wife Clara," he stopped, started again. "My daughter Emma, I couldn't save them. Clara took Clara." The baby followed. 3 days later, I rode for the doctor, but the snow was too deep. 3 days to get help. 3 days too late, his voice broke. I buried them and swore I'd never fail anyone again. Then I did every person I passed who needed help. Until you, Sarah, reached across the table, took his hand. Her touch was warm, alive. You're not failing now, she said. That's what matters. Emma stirred in her sleep, mumbled Papa without waking. Neither of them corrected her. Morning broke clear. The storm had passed. In a melted snow patch near the door, tiny green shoots pushed through frozen earth. Wild flowers, impossibly early. Spring was coming, but so was something else. A distant rider sat motionless on the ridge, watching. Then he turned and rode toward town. They walked into that church like sinners expecting stones. Sunday morning in Medicine Bend. The whole town gathered for service, families in their best clothes, pretending at righteousness. The cowboy, Sarah, and Emma sat in the back row. Whispers spread like disease. After the service, Sheriff Daniels approached with Caleb Stokes and 3 deputies. Stokes produced papers, a contract covered in official-looking seals. Sarah Brennan owes $500. Stokes announced loudly. She returns to work off her debt. Ori pays in full, an impossible sum. Everyone knew it. The pastor said nothing. The congregation watched like spectators at an execution. Only Elder Moses, 70 years old and weathered as driftwood, spoke up. This man's shown more Christian charity than any of you hypocrites. Stokes smiled. Charity. He's living in fornication with another man's property. The word hung in the air. Property. Sheriff Daniels shifted uncomfortably. I got legal papers. Cowboy, she comes with us or you pay. That's the law. The cowboy looked at the armed men, at the silent congregation, at Emma's terrified face. Could he fight the sheriff, risk Emma being taken by the town council for living in an immoral environment? His silence stretched too long. Sarah saw his paralysis, made her choice. I'll go, she said quietly. Don't punish him or Emma for my debts. She kissed Emma's head, walked toward Stokes's wagon. Papa, Emma screamed. Don't let her go. You promised. He stood frozen, old guilt resurfacing. The same paralysis that had cost him Clara, cost him his daughter. I can't fight the whole town, he whispered. Sarah climbed into the wagon, didn't look back. Emma collapsed, sobbing. Cowboy stood like a statue, watching the woman he'd failed disappear down the road. Elder Moses gripped his shoulder hard. You just became what you feared most, a man who stands by. The words hit like bullets because they were true. He'd already dug the 3rd grave for the man he used to be. 3 days later, the cabin was dark. The cowboy sat by Clara's grave with a bottle of whiskey, talking to ghosts. I failed you. I failed her. I failed everyone. Emma had been staying with Elder Moses. She hadn't spoken since Sunday. The cabin addition sat unfinished, mocking him. Hoof-beat hats. Emma appeared on horseback. She'd ridden alone. Dangerous for a child. She found him drunk by the graves. Mama said, you were a good man. Her voice shook. She was wrong. You're a coward. She slapped him. He barely reacted. More hoof-beat hats. Moses arrived. Dismounted heavily. Sarah's locked in the saloon. The elder said upstairs room. Stokes parades her to break her will. You want to honor your dead. Go get your living. Something broke through the whiskey fog. The cowboy stood, poured out the bottle, went to his chest, and pulled out a gun belt he hadn't worn since Clara died. Strapped it on, he knelt before Emma, eye level. Stay with Moses. I'm bringing her home. Promise. Her eyes were red. Desperate, I promise. This time I won't fail. He stood, checked his revolver, mounted his roan. Dawn was breaking. Moses told Emma, sometimes a man has to visit hell to remember he's human. The cowboy rode toward town. Rifle across his saddle. Behind him, Emma whispered a prayer to the graves. Please let him be strong enough this time. He walked into that saloon the way righteous men walk into fire. The street was empty. Medicine Bend held its breath. Inside, Caleb Stokes sat at a table with Virgil, Ray, and Sheriff Daniels. 4 armed men come to pay, Stokes asked, come to collect. The cowboy laid his land deed on the table. 200 acres, timber rights, water access, worth $2,000. I'll work Sarah's debt off in lumber and cattle over 2 years. Legal contract, Stokes laughed. I don't want your dirt, cowboy. I want her obedience. She needs to learn her place. The sheriff nodded. He'd been paid well to look the other way. The cowboy's hand moved toward his gun. Deputies tensed. The door opened. Elder Moses entered with a strong box, slammed it on the table. Inside, forged contracts. Proof Stokes had inflated debts. Written testimony from 3 other widows he'd exploited. Circuit judge arrives next week. Moses said, want him to see this. Stokes lunged for the box. The cowboy drew one clean motion. The gunshot was deafening in the closed space. The bullet punching through the ceiling. Touch that box, you die. Upstairs, a door crashed open. Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs holding a rifle she'd taken from her guard. She descended slowly, eyes locked on Stokes. I'll never be your property. She stood beside the cowboy. Together, they faced the room. Sheriff Daniels looked at the evidence, at the 2 armed figures, at Stokes's pale face. This ain't legal, Caleb. I'm out. The deputies lowered their weapons. Stokes backed toward the door. This isn't over, he hissed. It is, the cowboy said. They walked out together. The street had filled with townsfolk, silent witnesses. One woman began clapping slowly, then another, not universal approval, but something had shifted. Emma broke free from Moses, crashed into Sarah's arms. Mama, the word echoed down the empty street like a benediction. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it brought everything. 3 months later, the cabin expansion was complete. 2 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, a porch with chairs. Sarah's touch showed everywhere. Curtains in the windows, an herb garden by the door. The door itself painted blue. Emma played with barn kittens in the yard. Her laughter was a sound the land had needed. Elder Moses arrived on his old mare. Smiling Town voted to forgive the debt. Circuit judge arrested Stokes for fraud. They caught him 2 counties over trying to run. Sarah cried. The cowboy just nodded. He took them both to the graves. He'd carved Clara's and baby Emma's names clearly now. Planted wild flowers around the markers. The blooms were just opening purple and yellow against the green. I'd like them to meet you, he said quietly. Sarah knelt, placed her hand on Clara's stone. Thank you for making him the man who could save us. Emma picked wild flowers, placed them carefully. I'll be good. Other Emma, I promise to take care of him. The cowboy knelt, silent prayer moving his lips. When he rose, his eyes were clear. Later in the garden, Sarah and the cowboy worked side by side. Their hands moved in comfortable rhythm, planting, watering, tending. What do we do now? She asked. He looked at the cabin, at Emma playing, at Sarah's face in the warm light. We keep building together. If you'll have me, she took his hand. I already have you. They didn't kiss. That wasn't what mattered. They stood, hands joined, watching Emma chase a kitten through the wild flowers. The camera pulled back aerial view. The cabin sat surrounded by green smoke, rising from the chimney in a steady white column. 3 figures stood at the threshold, Emma between the adults, holding both their hands as one. They stepped inside. The door closed gently. Wild flowers bloomed across the graves, death and life coexisting, neither erasing the other. His voice came soft over the image. I thought I'd buried everything worth protecting. Turns out love doesn't fill the holes it builds around them. And sometimes, the hard way, is the only way home lasts. The screen faded to black. Peace earned and permanent settled over the land like spring snow, gentle, brief, and somehow holy.